Oh, is there anyone in this group who is willing to take the responsibility of downloading it? And that does not include John or Patsy.
I'll do it this
John,
time.
we're
Just to
looking for new
just
people to take on tasks.
oh, you're right. Okay, I'll step back and let you do your pitch. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, that was my pitch, but John will teach you. But we need, um, you don't want me to touch your technology. So we need someone who's not John and Patsy, who are already doing too much, to take on the job of downloading our recordings, because we seem to have a lot of them, and that does take a little bit of time. Anyone here want to volunteer? If you
This
don't,
is just for the energy working group. And the bonus is that you get to learn how to use Google Sites to do web authoring and YouTube Creator for uploading videos.
I'm
So,
happy to. That's something
oh,
I've done before. And
okay,
oh, great. And let's connect after this meeting. Thanks.
okay, thank you.
thank you. Yay.
And I'll have to pop out at some unknown time, but
Okay,
thank you. But we'll connect after.
great. Back to you, Chris.
Okay. So yeah, this is one where it's a study. We want the study to happen. More information is useful. Any questions on that one? Because I actually don't know anything about HB 1267. Does anyone else know about this?
Well, I think that's about investment. Last year, something passed that our retirement, so it's just more of that retirement funds and government funds should not be invested in anything that's specifically ESG. And it's purely political. And if I have not read about it, I just intuitively, that's where I invest. And it just seems to me like it is smart to know what the prognostications are for your investments, given what's happening with the environment. But I'll use whatever Fast Democracy says about that paragraph.
And it seems that when any organization, hospital, government, or whatever does that program, they actually get better returns on their investments than when they do not. So it's kind of like not, they're against it, but not for economic reasons. It's political.
Right.
My understanding, and 315H plans to try and testify on this bill as well. But my understanding is that it was really put out there for people, that there are some individuals who are trying to force investment back into fossil fuels. And so since one of the criteria that can be used here is not investing in fossil fuels, this is trying to then kind of force investments into fossil fuels.
But the arguments that are being given are, we're not considering our investments based on our ideology or politics. We're basing it on sound economic principles. So I don't know how you phrase your counter to that argument. But I'll see what it says on Fast Democracy.
I mean, this one to me is they're using it to ensure that decisions are not made that would exclude fossil fuels. But it's done for the wrong reasons. It's not a.
But I've heard insurance agents who say, and this is true now, we need to look at the prognosis for buildings on the coast. Do we want to insure them, and do we want to insure them at the same rate next year that we did 10 years ago? So prudent financial managers do look at what's happening with the environment. And so to that extent, it's stupid not to include that, but I don't know how to phrase it. Well, I'll think about it.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is, I think what we're all seeing in the nation is that there are insurance markets that are being abandoned by insurance companies because they're no longer profitable. There's just too much loss involved and people won't pay the premiums. The banks will follow after that, but the investors are going to keep pushing as long as they can because they're not bearing the risk. They're building, and like Florida continues to build. They're knocking down old houses and putting in new ones in areas that will be inundated. I think this is trying to maximize the flow of dollars into those areas in a bad faith effort for as long as possible.
So should I mention the insurance parallel, even though I'm saying it off the top of my uneducated head?
I think having specific references, like I just referenced the story of them pulling out of certain markets in Florida. I can dig that up and share it, and you can note that, you know, there are considerations that are being made because of, you know, environmental and social changes. This is not like there's millions and if not billions of dollars that are on the move.
Right. And similarly, you know, there are now renewable companies that are not dicey investments, you know. So sure, if you dig up anything, I'll use it, Chris. And if you don't have time, don't worry.
One example that might be a pretty easy one to just pull up is that the First Street Foundation. If you Google them, they have a list of all the businesses that use their climate data for planning.
Oh,
And it lists like all the major insurers and all the major real estate bodies these days.
oh, well, that does it all. So First Street Foundation.
Yeah. And
Okay.
yeah. The list of their clients will be pretty telling.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
to the extent that you can also note that like banks, like insurance will be the most risk averse because they have the biggest to lose. If banks can't be insured, then they will follow. If we can like note that banks are starting to do this too, I think that's helpful. I'm not sure the banking industry writ large is ready to stand up to politicians because they still run on short-term returns as well. So they don't want to make anyone mad until they have to.
And Susan, just one other thing, I'm pretty sure Roger Stevenson wrote about this when this bill came out a year ago. I'm trying to
Ah.
find it, and I can't find it. So you might want to just email him because he might be able to give you some more information.
Well, I only have to fill this tiny little box.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
but if you think that's something Bruce would want in the newsletter,
Okay, I'll keep trying to see if I can find what he wrote too.
okay, and I'll let me see how the time goes if I can write Roger. Thanks, Patsy.
All right. So just to keep us moving, HB 1644, this would require the Department of Energy to initiate an investigation of the benefits and considerations regarding support for clean or non-carbon emitting generation. I'm trying to remember, this is where it's definitely the case where tracking who the bill sponsor is also helpful to, so you can just see who they are. And once you get a sense of who all your, the legislators are on the various committees, it can tell you basically this question: is it bad or is it good? Generally, if you have like a good bipartisan mix, there's agreement that this will benefit the state. In this case, I have looked at the bill. I can't remember who the sponsors are, and this, especially because it's an investigation, does not, to me, seem to be entirely ill intent, even if because the way that these investigations are run, there's 3 currently underway. I've participated in 2. The Department of Energy will host a discussion over a year or 2-year period, depends on what the law requires. And they'll take comments, hold listening sessions, hold technical sessions, and it allows people to dig into these topics in a way that, unfortunately, we just can't get into at the Public Utilities Commission or at the legislature. Very often we talk at each other while talking to the legislature, and that's a really unproductive way to have a dialogue. So I tend to view these investigations as an opportunity to dig into something before a bill, good or bad, arrives at the legislature, so that anyone that does show up has had a chance to hear from both sides or all sides. There's not just 2 sides. I can't see whose hands up, so just.
Okay, my hand's up. The sponsors are Vos, Ammon, Harrington, Thomas, Pearl, Avard, Nodder, and Corman. Corman being the sole Dem. And I know I had read elsewhere earlier that this was sort of a way to show that nuclear really is the most effective of all non-carbon emitting, and that would mean that based on the formulas that are used for how funding comes, that nuclear would sort of suck up all the funding. That's what I know.
So I
So
think now that you're raising it, there was a bill that would have created a clean portfolio standard that ultimately did get changed. And so I think that's where this went. The fact that we do have Avard and Pearl as well as Corman suggests that there is a broader view being taken as Senator Avard, as chair of the Energy and Natural Resource Committee, has sponsored a lot of the bills that have been very important to the state over the past several years. I think the fact that it is an investigation does not preclude that other things will come up. But one of the keys is does the department have resources in order to maybe do some of the analysis, or is it going to be strictly a qualitative, a subjective arguments are made rather than any sort of evaluation?
Do you know if it has anything to do with being against offshore wind development?
I think this is where, if we could, does anyone mind if
well, John's got
Is-
his hand up. John, do you know more?
I'm just suspicious of all the list of characters there who proposed this bill, sponsored it.
Yeah, and I was trying to figure out there's a couple. There's one Democrat and two others that maybe have better intentions, but the majority of the list seem to do things that really benefit the fossil fuel industry and ignore climate science. But I think this. I was just going to comment. I think this is might be a valuable one for some of us to go testify to make sure they know that the public wants them to be accounting for the social cost of carbon in the calculations.
And
Senator Partial?
oh, go ahead. There's multiple hands up.
Representative Partial?
Yes, thank you. This bill was discussed in the Democrat caucus today. And I would suggest that you don't want to read too much into the participation of Thomas Corman in sponsoring this bill. We like to work with the other side, but we have a variety of concerns about this bill. Wind was not mentioned, by the way. And it does seem like I think that comment on nuclear, pushing nuclear is a good one. I'm also afraid, personally, that this is meant to undermine the Vija report that came out a couple of years ago, as we need an alternative to see if there's actual cost shifting. A committee like this could come up with that conclusion, and based on some other legislation we have, they could work together to damage the long-term use of the Vija report. So there's some concerns there, but generally speaking, we're not opposed to a study. I've probably made it clear as mud.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering if we should do it as a monitor or as a or as an oppose.
So honestly, so this is where in having participated in numerous studies over the past 15 years and the ones that are happening now, I think this one might end up being one where if they're hoping they'll find certain information, but I don't think the information they're looking for is going to come to the fore. So the VETR study that Representative Partial just mentioned is under scrutiny at the PUC right now, and every single party that is participating in the net metering docket basically has not taken significant issue with the study and what it found to be a very small cost shift, and saying just keep the net metering rate where it is. It's appropriate. We see much bigger cost shift in other areas, and those are deemed to be acceptable. This has just been a political hot potato. However, there's been recent reanalysis by our consultants that found that there was some errors that were made in some of the assumptions. And when those assumptions are corrected to values that are more robust, the cost shift not only disappears, but it actually reverses so that we will see, you know, $8 million that are being returned to non-participating customers. So those that don't have DG. Now that doesn't mean that Susan opens her statement and sees that she has an $8 million credit. It's spread across all ratepayers. But over the course of the next 15 years, it's estimated to accrue to about 123 million. And so as we go further into the future, I think the data is going to start to stack up against the narrative that, you know, wind and solar are bad. And then they'll also see that the entire ISO New England queue, 95% of it is wind, solar, and storage. There are no gas or nuclear plants that are being proposed for this region because they're just too costly and the politics are just not there.
So maybe just put it in as monitor. In other words, acknowledging that we know it's there, but too many complicated factors to.
Yeah, and it might be one just let go through, but then you can show up and participate in the investigation and bring your concerns to that and participate. And that's basically, if the Department of Energy is run by another Republican, you can show up and make sure that there's a balanced inquiry happening.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's good to have in the list, and it's good for people to show up and make sure they use academically sound costing. It's worded a little bit regarding support for clean or non-carbon emitting power generation, as opposed to looking at all of the options. But
Yeah.
I think by testifying, we can make sure that it's, you know, we want it to be fair across all options.
I think you're right, John, in tying in on the non-carbon, it doesn't say renewable. And then also Representative Amon is very keen on the nuclear sector.
Nuclear, yeah.
So just to keep moving, HB 1600, this is a great bill for everyone to just sign in support of. And if you're having, and maybe even like reach out to the whole committee. So if you're unfamiliar with how to sign in support, there's language we can get to everybody on, like, here's how you do it. So you can sign in on the day of, up till midnight of the same day. But then you can also send comments generally in support of net metering to the committee. HB 1600 is actually a bill that we strongly support. It comes from Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. And what it would ultimately do is allow CPCNH to have more flexibility in terms of actually doing net metering and possibly even contracting for net metering within their business scheme, and then use that to net meter to actually get better rates as they get more net metering interconnected into their system. It is an incredibly complex bill that I've already had 3 different conversations that are spanning an hour each. And so this is one where I'm not sure if we're even going to testify, because there are some key, no, I'm not sure what our testimony is yet, because there are some key changes that even the bill sponsor is kind of like, not the bill sponsor, but the, that may be not instituted, but recommended, that it's just like one word change and it ends up becoming a more elegant solution. So this is one where, like, simple signing in and saying that you support it is sometimes is like the best that we could hope for, because things will be changing between Monday or today and Monday in terms of what final points people end up making. But it is a good thing. We're hoping it passes. So there's a couple bills that will actually on January 30th. So this is Tuesday. But we may end up seeing these a couple times. But anything that's at the House Science Technology Committee, starting at 1:30 and then running till 3, these are going to be in exec session. And so these are not an opportunity for folks to testify. It's an opportunity for the committee itself to reflect on what happened at the hearings, reflect on what's happened, maybe in their own conversations as they've consulted with constituents or each other. So this is one where I think there is a very strong support for this bill to die. And so there's basically not that much that can happen at this one.
Okay,
Um,
that sounds like we just need to update the chart from previous weeks. So Donna's got that figured out.
Yep.
My bad, sorry.
No. This is like why we chat. HB 1332. This is a bill from Representative Prue. He had another bill that did not survive this week. But generally the concern that folks are raising about electric vehicles is if you have a fire inside a parking garage, it can burn so hot that it destabilizes the entire garage. Also, electric vehicles are heavy. So that might be bad, which wait till they hear about SUVs. So there's going to be likely a lot of pushback on this. This is something where the fire marshal and others in the fire community are pushing for Senate Bill 430, which would create a committee or commission to investigate EV batteries as well as e-mobility batteries, scooters, bikes, as lithium and other types of batteries are becoming more and more pervasive. So in this case, we personally will be recommending, so Clean Energy New Hampshire, recommending that this topic is ripe for discussion and that putting it in statute that EVs would be banned from parking garages for a decade is too hard, like, to change. Simply studying it while there are low adoption rates makes the most sense, and then we can act on that information.
Interestingly, there was a hearing for 1333 this
Yep.
week, which was a 10-year ban on state procurement of vehicles that use hybrid or EV electric technology. 10-year ban. It was just kind of amazing that they thought we would need 10 years more to make
It was
hybrid
that
cars.
was also a Representative Prue bill, and that one I believe died 20-0 in committee.
Oh, good.
Like some of the facts that we had noted is if the governor wants to, the governor can pass an executive order and ban it until for further notice, and then whenever the governor wants to, they can rescind that executive order. A lot more flexibility in what the state government can and can't do if we want to keep do certain actions. But
Yeah.
outright bans of a decade or more do not make sense because you have to get the entire legislature, both sides, and the governor to make a change.
I testified, and one of the representatives on the committee used the opportunity to ask me to explain why I thought CO2 was pollution. Again, a follow-up from the proxy carbon pricing bill, questioning that he had given me the week before. And the committee of the chair said the CO2 has not been ruled a pollutant, but it actually has and recently been ruled a pollutant by the EPA emissions from fossil fuels, the CO2 emissions. So I was able to correct that. So it helps to testify at these kind of ridiculous bills because you can produce facts and get people to think about what their opinions are and maybe if their positions are not based on facts. So it went well, but I'm glad to hear it died because it was unclear what was going to happen to it from the questions.
Yeah. I mean, the full House will still have an opportunity to vote on it, and someone could argue for it to be brought back and sent over to the Senate. But I don't know all that much about this. I feel like it should pass, but this is just it's preventing a practice called icing, where you put an internal combustion engine, an ICE vehicle, in a spot that's designated for electric charging vehicles, because especially now, there are few spots that are available for charging. And if they're occupied by someone that is just looking for a convenient spot, that gets in the way of charging. It should pass, but maybe there's a sudden live free or die mentality that takes everybody up. So this is a bill where I'm pretty sure this is Representative Amon bill, and this is clearly looking at the studies for nuclear energy technologies. Representative Amon is very interested in things like next generation reactors, and he's just very. We've been talking to him at Clean Energy New Hampshire, principally Sam Evans Brown, and I don't think we will be taking a position on this bill because again, it doesn't end up doing anything by my recollection. It doesn't result in an actual change that is threatening. Any questions? Sometimes we are silent on bills because by being silent, we don't irritate people that ultimately we might need them for things that we are more strategically need to get done.
I think that's good philosophy, Mr. Skoglund, but I would also say that the one thing I believe the one thing that this bill does, it's one we were talking about, is it does appoint a new employee to the Department of Energy, basically a cheerleader for the nuclear industry. I would love to see cheerleaders of this nature, but we don't have any for solar or wind or anything else. So it's a little bit of a carve out there, I think.
Yeah.
But this is a bill I'm thinking about. I'm pretty sure it is, yes.
Okay. Yeah, there has been someone who I thought was supposed to be the wind cheerleader in the Department of Energy, but I've only seen them speak on one occasion.
Mhm.
I think mostly they're just monitoring what's happening at the federal level. So as I was saying, the executive session, these are some of the bills that will be heard. I don't know. Originally, we had talked about HB 1697 because everyone was concerned that this would pull New Hampshire out of RGGI, and this would suspend our participation for 2 years. It was that was corrected by the bill sponsors 2 weeks ago when they came and spoke, and they were more concerned about not RGGI itself, but forest carbon credits and how the sale of forest carbon credits from New Hampshire properties that had traditionally been available for winter and just generally like recreation and timber harvesting would be impacted by companies that were from out of state that were coming in and now managing these properties. I think on Monday, the Science, Technology, and Environment Committee got not a hearing, but a presentation on forest carbon programs. And I don't know where it is after that. We had stopped following it once they pulled RGGI from the crosshairs. Representative Partial, could I put you on the spot and see if is this bill moving forward, or is the executive session likely to just?
I'm happy to be put on the spot, so to speak. I just don't want to monopolize your time here, but yeah.
You're our inside guy.
Okay, well, we had an excellent presentation by Charlie Below, I think his name was. And we had testimony from Jason Stock and there's definitely some very, very mixed feelings on this. And we have the Republican Harrington, who sits next to me, is adamant that we're not going to seize private property and tell people what they can do on their private property. It's a very divisive issue right now. But I think at the end of the day, we're not going to see any viable legislation come out of that bill.
Okay.
That's my belief.
Yeah, it did seem like they have a concern. It may be a valid concern related to the economy of the North Country, but
It is.
They were perhaps had picked a solution that was not right, and even some of the test case, so to speak, had the owner or manager of the property came and spoke and noted that certain things were not as characterized. Now he may have been putting a nice shine on it to improve their image, but I think it's definitely one that stands more work.
I could also add that one of the problems that we see right now is we don't know who is selling carbon sequestration credits. And maybe John Gage might have some insight into that. But I think what a lot of people are crying for right now is a federal registry for people who engage in these activities. It would make sense. And I don't know if John Gage has any thoughts on that or not. But John, maybe I should ask you offline about those things.
Sure. I'm actually not an expert at all in carbon credits. I want to put an explicit price on carbon and let the market and the rules follow whatever they follow. I just know it's the first step is the most important one, and then we'll work out the details. And this is an important detail, but I don't really have much to offer as far as advice.
Okay, it's a tough one though. And
All right, so
sorry, you.
Yeah, just looking at the time, we have just noting the executive session, they'll be talking about the cost effectiveness. I think we already touched on that. The relative to the nuclear energy technologies, they'll have a hearing in the morning, and then they'll have the executive session so that possibly it can be voted out of committee. During the executive session, that once they get to the end of that, under ideal circumstances, they will hold a vote, and then based on that vote, it will leave committee with a recommendation, either, ought to pass, which is recommending the full house passes it, or ITL, which is a polite way of saying the bill was killed, or perhaps interim study where it gets a little bit more work. This past week, I think it was, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. So it's going to have its own executive session. This would have created a rebate using not New Hampshire Energy Saves funds, which is what many people read into this. So the energy efficiency funds they are talking about specifically would come from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative auction sales. For those of you that aren't familiar, RGGI allowances, 1 allowance equals 1 ton of carbon emitted by a fossil fuel electric generator in the RGGI region, which is not just New England, but all of New England and most of the mid-Atlantic. So when these allowances are sold, 3 million allowances are allocated to New Hampshire in reflecting of past emissions. So we're trying to ratchet down. So when the auction allowances get sold for $13 million or $13 per allowance, we should be taking in $39 million. New Hampshire state law requires that all but $1 from the sale of each allowance goes back to ratepayers. So everyone gets 21 cents on their bill per month, and the New Hampshire Energy Saves program receives $3 million of that $39 million. Knowing that, you'll now understand that this would have taken $3 million from the money that's rebated to customers, and it would put it towards the purchase of electric vehicles in New Hampshire. That would complement federal tax credits. What I heard in a session of the Drive Electric New Hampshire Coalition on Wednesday is that the Science, Technology, and Environment Committee was more receptive to this bill than was expected, in part because that 21-cent rebate to customers is not making or breaking anyone's budget. Doesn't matter where you fall on the socioeconomic scale. Again, that 21 cents is just an average. But with a $3 million rebate going into EVs for New Hampshire drivers, maybe the rebate goes from 21 cents down to 19 cents. Again, not something that anyone is going to notice. But perhaps now we have $3 million that we could be putting towards some sort of electric vehicle incentive program that ultimately might benefit certain groups. So I've heard that there was some considerations made regarding how do we make it income qualified so we can be helping those that want to buy an EV, but at present, because of various socioeconomic factors, aren't capable of doing it. There's a rising EV used vehicle market, but even then, they may have been out of reach of certain people. So maybe we give a low income grant that is put on the hood of a car. So you go in and you buy it, maybe it's $1,000 less. So we're definitely in support of this, but we didn't think it would make it as far as it did. So I'm really interested to see what happens on Tuesday. Now, I think the rest of the bills are where we start to get into, I don't know anything about these. So if anyone happens to know, they're on the list, and if we're almost at time as well.
Okay. 1623. Oh, that your earlier meeting was saying that was priority opposed.
Oh, wait, did we not talk about 1623?
That was at your CNH.
Okay, yes.
the early
So
meeting.
I guess you guys have having me talk, but this is definitely one where Clean Energy New Hampshire and a lot of others are concerned. And to the extent that you can show up or send anything, we would be greatly appreciative. Because what this does is there is a statute that is left over from, I had previously mentioned if I go all the way back up, 1431 Representative Partial's bill would recreate some critical planning for the utilities, but it would attach itself to the remnants of a statute from last year. HB 1623 would radically overhaul that remaining statute and would really put an emphasis on non-clean energy generation basically saying that, and I think this gets more at what we were worried about with that study of the clean and non-emitting generation. This is basically setting in place requirements that emphasize the state should be planning for essentially, and it doesn't say it, but fossil fuels and nuclear facilities only, because they can be called on, in theory, to run any time of day, any time of year. That's not always true. We have seen them freeze and shut down and trip offline just like any other facility. But this is definitely biased against wind and solar, which are weather dependent. Or they're environmental conditions dependent. So this is one that we are strenuously opposing, and anyone that is available to send in comments to the House Science and Technology Committee voicing concerns about this, which would be directing us away from clean energy, those comments can be made, or you can actually come to the State House on Tuesday in the morning.
Chris, is there a reason? They just seem to be ignoring storage, which is getting cheaper and complements wind and solar so obviously to address those problems.
I mean, so this is where under some portions of the law, storage probably could be argued that it's might qualify, but they're really looking for like continuous baseload. We also are in the midst of multiple investigations into how do we interconnect storage? How do we value storage? There was a study that was at the PUC. It's now at the Department of Energy. And then there's a new bill this year that would give the Department of Energy an additional year to study storage. So it is one that they're looking at, but it's not one that they're looking to embrace. However, states around us are looking to support it so they can be getting more balance when the sun goes down, the wind kicks off. And then also it adds resilience during power outages as well. But I think this is that, to M's point about like locking in fossil fuels. This isn't an investigation. This would actually lock it into statute and make it harder to do. But there are actually some Supreme Court cases that may show that parts of this, if not all of it, are outright illegal. So there's going to be a lot of different arguments made on Tuesday.
Change of topic, 1576, relative to allowing property owners to opt out of public utilities. I just heard that would really destabilize municipalities.
So I looked into that question. So this is, I think, the one that's focused on trying to create a system where there is a little bit more certainty in the market. And oh, wait, that's a different bill. I don't know what this one is at all.
So Representative Marshall, you have information?
We,
1576.
I have it here in front of me, you know, we were looking at this one too. And all we can gather, it's a free state libertarian attempt to demand what people put on their property. Problems with it are, you know, I mean, okay, so you don't want to have electric lines to your property. What happens when the fire company comes or something like that, you know, I mean, we're well past the time when people can opt in and out is what the general feeling of the Democratic caucus was. So, but we didn't spend a lot of time on it because we don't really see how they could really move forward with a bill like this. The sponsors, I really don't know them that well. Layton, Cushman, Kelly, and Sorosis, all Republicans. And I'm not saying you should draw anything from that, but it seems like it's just kind of a free straight kind of thing. That's my best enlightenment. I wish I could tell you more.
So maybe just say monitor so that people don't feel obliged to weigh in on a cascade of bills. And we don't have to explain it further. But if anything more comes of it, we'll get louder. Yeah, Sarah.
Hi, thanks. I have a question for anyone here about whether you've heard about the proposed trash to energy plant that is being voted on by Ashland for town property, 25 megawatts. developed by, I think it's Waldron. And this might entail getting some changes or taking advantage of wording so that they can qualify as a green, so-called green energy source. And I don't know all the details about it. I live in the next town, so I'm really concerned about the emissions. But from the standpoint of state law and regulation, I just wondered if this is being discussed at all in Concord. Chris or John or Representative Partial, have you heard anything about this? They're looking to get more subsidies, to support the proposal economically, to get it recognized as green energy, which I can't see any way that could be considered green energy or renewable.
I can be very quickly weigh in and just say that there's been no talk around the joint STD committee about this, and I can't help you with that one, I guess.
This kind of a similar thing came up years ago, and the talk then was, well, yeah, it's renewable because you keep getting more trash to burn, and so it keeps going. Like, really.
Oh,
Okay,
it
thank you.
reminds me of the advanced recycling bill that was heard
Yeah.
in the last session, which I can't remember how that ended up. But obviously, if you're burning plastic, that's carbon that came out of the ground with fossil fuels, and it's going up into the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas. So that's not a green source of energy.
Well, I know, so Cynthia Walter of the Plastics Working Group has been one of the leaders dealing with things in the air that shouldn't be there. But at DES, Paige Wilson, Paige Wilson, is their waste reduction person, and she can at least tell you what she knows and how it interacts with the statute. She's just really friendly and knowledgeable. That would be a good place to start, or
Thank you.
or maybe talk to Karen Ebel, chair of the Solid Waste Working Group.
Can you spell her last name?
Representative Ebel, it's spelled E-B-E-L, Karen with a K, K-A-R-E-N, and
Thank
she's a
you.
rep. So those just would be two places to start getting some information and finding out the extent to which they're worried about this. or
Very
with
good.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we're 1 minute away from 3. Wow, this was a real interactive session. Thank you, everyone. And let people know it's good, and maybe we'll get a few more people, or maybe everyone knows what they're doing, and we're just the ones admitting our ignorance. But thanks all. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks very much, Chris.
And
Thanks, everyone.
thanks for Representatives
Representative.
Herschel and Shepherdson.
Yeah, thank you for having the meeting.
Sure. Oh, I'll turn off the
Thank you,
recording.
Paul.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.